In every forgotten village, there is a story never meant to be spoken. Not in daylight, not in joy, only beside a candle, only when the wind refuses to move. Welcome to FolkFear. Here we gather beneath shadows older than time, where every whispered tale drips with ritual, sorrow, and soil, where curses are sewn into wedding veils, and prayers are fed to the dead in silence, where fire remembers names, and the ancestors are never truly gone, just waiting. Each story you hear is a step deeper into the old ways, the ways they begged us to forget. Tonight's tale is one of blood, wax, and memory, of offerings that were once sacred and now demand to be repaid. This is the Blood Candle Offering, a haunting folk horror tale. Let the wick be lit, let the sins begin to burn, and whatever you do, do not look away when the flame turns red.
The rain stopped just as Leanne reached the edge of the village. For 3 days she had walked beneath a sky the color of soot, her sandals soaked, her palms raw from gripping the straps of a burlap sack that held everything she owned. And yet, the moment her foot crossed the mossy threshold marked by 2 rotting wooden pillars, remnants of the village gate that once bore her family name, the clouds thinned and the air grew unnaturally still. No wind, no birds, just the sharp scent of wax. Leanne paused. It wasn't candle wax, not the gentle kind that burns sweet with herbs and prayer. This was sharp, metallic, heavy like blood on iron, a scent that clung to the tongue. Her fingers twitched around the sack strap. Something in her memory stirred like old bones shifting beneath wet soil. She hadn't been back here since she was 8, since her mother's body was carried out of the house in silence, wrapped in red cloth, no ceremony, no fire, only whispers. She lit the candle without permission. The blood wick wasn't hers to burn. Leanne had never understood what that meant. She still didn't. But she had come back. The ghost festival was nearing. The roads would close. The old would light offerings. The dead would visit the living. And somewhere in the middle, she, neither child nor mother, neither believer nor blasphemer, would try to find the pieces of herself that had been scattered like wax droplets across the years. The first house she passed had no door, just hanging red ribbons that moved as if something had brushed them, though no breeze stirred. The air smelled thick with mold and old paper charms. A woman stared from behind a shutter. Her mouth opened, but no words came. She simply nodded once, slow, and disappeared into the dark. Leanne walked on. At the bend of the path, nestled between 2 banyan trees, strangling a crumbling stone altar, she saw the candle shop. Except it shouldn't be there. Her grandmother used to tell her stories of the shop that made offerings for the whole village, a place where wax was mixed not just with oils and scent, but with threads of hair, nail clippings, and drops of blood. Offerings made from the body so the ancestors would recognize the soul. But the shop had burned down decades ago, before her birth. And yet here it stood, small, windowless, a cracked wooden sign that read only, "Burn with care." She blinked. Once. The door creaked open. Inside, the shop smelled of salt and something darker, old fire, extinguished too late. Racks lined the walls, each holding thin, tall candles wrapped in silk, tied with cords of human hair. The air was heavy, thick enough to press against her chest. An old woman stood behind the counter, bent low, her eyes milky with age. She didn't speak. She simply held out a candle. Red, long, the wick already blackened. Lien opened her mouth. "I didn't." "You did," the woman said. Her voice sounded like torn cloth. "I don't understand. You came back. That is enough. Blood remembers." The candle was placed gently into Lien's hands. It was warm, as if someone had just blown out a flame. "Do I pay?" The old woman chuckled. "You already have." Before she could respond, the woman turned and disappeared through a curtain made of bones strung together with red thread. The door opened behind her. She hadn't touched it. Outside, the air was colder. The candle pulsed in her grip, faintly, like a heartbeat. Back in the house her mother died in, Lien placed the candle on the old altar, its surface dusted with ash and cracked rice offerings. Her fingers traced the burn marks near the edge of the table, memories flickering like the ghosts the villagers believed wandered this season. She did not light it. Not yet. That night, the wind returned, a low hum outside her window. The trees bent without moving, and somewhere in the dark, the scent returned, thick, wet, and wrong. Lien woke with a start, heart racing. The candle was no longer on the altar. It stood by her bed, lit, a tiny flame, dancing without smoke. Lien stared. She hadn't lit it, she was sure, and yet the wick glowed, steady, and a trail of melted wax dripped not down, but up, curling back toward the flame. She reached toward it. A voice, soft and sibilant, brushed against her ear. "Do not touch what has already chosen you." She turned. No one. Only her reflection in the dark window. Only it wasn't her. Not quite. The woman in the reflection wore her face, but older, thinner, hollow-eyed, and smiling. The candle flickered, and in the silence that followed, the air smelled again, not of wax, but of something deeper, something that remembered pain. It smelled of sin. Lien did not sleep the rest of that night. The next morning, Lien awoke to silence so deep it seemed to hum beneath her skin. The candle was gone. Only a faint red stain remained on the wooden floor, shaped like a teardrop that had soaked inward instead of outward, sinking into the grain, as though the house itself had drunk it. Lien knelt and touched the spot. It was still warm. Outside, mist hung low over the village, heavy and pale like trapped breath. The fields beyond were drowned in silver fog, and the sound of water trickled somewhere unseen. The smell of wax still lingered faintly in the air, mixed with something sharper, iron maybe, or blood. When she stepped outside, the villagers were already gathered at the central shrine. Old men in gray robes burned paper money, their faces blank, their mouths murmuring words older than the language she knew. Children pressed their palms together, eyes closed, whispering names of the dead, but no one looked at her. No one ever did. She walked among them, invisible yet known, the healer's daughter who had left, the cursed one. Leon's eyes caught movement near the well, a shadow darting behind it, too quick, too fluid. When she approached, she saw something carved into the stones that she hadn't noticed before. Lines and symbols looping in circles, half washed away by moss, but still pulsing faintly red, as if something beneath the stone was bleeding upward. And beside the well, resting on the ground, was another candle, smaller, burnt almost halfway. The wax around its base looked like frozen blood, pooled and solidified mid-drip. She bent down, hesitating. Then the whisper came again, curling through her mind like smoke. "The well remembers." She froze. Her mother had said those same words once, long ago, the night before she died. That was the night Leon had woken to find her mother kneeling at the well, dripping blood from her palm into a bowl, whispering prayers not to the sky, but to the water. She had thought it was madness, but now as she looked into the darkness of the well, she saw that the water below was not still. It moved against gravity, rising, folding, pulling itself upward in slow, shivering ripples, like blood flowing backward. By midday, Leon found herself at the home of Elder Ba, the oldest living soul in the village. He sat on a bamboo mat, staring at the shrine in his corner, his back curved like an old branch. His eyes, half blind, followed her as she entered. "I know why you've come," he said without greeting. "The candle called you." Leon hesitated. "You know about it?" "I know enough." His fingers trembled as he reached for a clay cup, the sound of porcelain scraping faintly against the wood. "Your grandmother kept the 13th wick. Your mother was supposed to keep it after her. And me? You were never meant to touch it." Elder Ba's breath rattled in his chest as he spoke. "Long ago, before your bloodline betrayed the pact, your family tended the altar of return. They were candle keepers, those who ensured that the blood of the living could still find its way back to the ancestors. You think prayers go up? No. The old ways were different. The blood flows upward, yes, but not from the living to the sky, from the dead to us, from beneath. The offering isn't what you give, it's what you take." Leon's stomach twisted. "That's wrong." "It's balance," the elder rasped. "When a person dies, their spirit still hungers. If not fed, it claws its way through wax and soil. So we feed them through flame, a little blood, a little wax, and the bond stays calm." "And if it's not fed?" The elder's hand shook. "Then the candle burns itself." Leon left his house with her head spinning. Every shadow along the path seemed to breathe. Every puddle looked like an eye. As she passed the banyan tree near the old shrine, she noticed thin red threads tied to its roots. Some had dried leaves stuck to them, others small charms made of teeth or bone. But one thread was different, newer. It pulsed faintly like a vein. Curiosity drew her closer. At its end hung a small wax figure, shaped like a person but melted almost to nothing. Its head was hollow, and inside it lay something dark. She touched it and gasped. It was a fingernail, fresh, embedded in wax as though it had been bitten off moments ago. The figure was warm, the wax soft. Someone had left it here recently. Suddenly, the mist shifted, and she wasn't alone. A child stood a few meters away, barefoot, his skin pale like rice paper. His eyes were dark, too dark, like holes filled with melted wax. His mouth twitched upward in something that wasn't quite a smile. "You shouldn't touch that," he said softly. His voice sounded like two people speaking at once. "It belongs to the well." She took a step back. "Who are you?" The boy tilted his head. "I carry the candles for those who forget." She noticed then that he held a lantern. Its glass was cracked, but a red flame burned steadily inside, pulsing with the same rhythm as the candles she'd received. The boy looked at her hands, and his voice lowered to a whisper. "You have one of ours, the 13th. Lian clutched her bag instinctively. "I didn't ask for it." "Blood doesn't ask, it calls, and it's calling again." He turned away, stepping toward the fog, and as he did, his feet left no prints in the soil. "Wait!" Lian shouted. "What do you mean it's calling?" He paused only once, his back to her. "When the blood flows backward, it means the ancestors have started remembering." Then he walked into the fog and vanished. That night, Lian couldn't sleep. The house felt smaller, as if the walls had crept closer. The air inside shimmered faintly in the candlelight, though she hadn't lit a single candle. The air carried the same sharp scent, the scent of wax and sin. She lit a lantern, her hands trembling, and whispered into the dark, "Mother, if you can hear me." But no words came back, only the faint hiss of something breathing through walls that should not breathe. And then, drip, drip, drip. She turned. The altar was wet again, a single line of blood trailing down its surface, pooling into the floorboard crack. When she leaned closer, she saw that the blood wasn't falling. It was rising, crawling upward, against gravity, returning to the base of the candle that wasn't even there. Lian's heart pounded. The old man's words echoed in her mind. When the blood flows backward, the ancestors remember. And in the moment that thought finished forming, a voice whispered behind her ear. "Then remember me." Lian spun around. No one. Only the reflection of her face again, faint in the lantern glass, older, colder, and smiling. The bloodline vanished, and the house began to hum.
That night, Lian dreamed of wax. Not candlelight, not warmth. Wax. Thick, heavy, dripping from a ceiling she could not see, falling without sound, without end. It slid down invisible walls, forming long threads that pulsed like veins. The room she stood in was not hers. It was darker, older, made of earth and bone and breath. A shrine stood in the center, cracked and crooked, its surface flickering with 13 candles. But one flame was brighter, too bright, too red. And from that single candle emerged a child, naked, waxy-skinned, its face a melting blur. Its hands reached for her, but its mouth did not open. It oozed toward her, eyes hollow, dripping as it crawled across the ground, leaving a trail of red wax in its wake. She could smell it. Not wax, blood. The child's chest opened like a cracked candle casing, revealing a blackened wick buried inside a rib cage. It burned without fire, just heat, invisible and deep. And when it touched her foot, her skin blistered. She tried to run, but her legs sank into the ground which had turned to warm wax. She screamed and woke. The room was cold. Too cold. Lian sat upright, heart pounding, her skin damp. Her foot ached. She flung off the blanket. There, on her right foot,
was a perfect circle of pink, swollen, soft, a fresh burn. The dream hadn't ended. It had followed her here. She crawled toward the altar. The candle was back, right in the center, unlit. But the wick was blackened again, as though someone had lit it in the night and snuffed it before dawn. Her fingers hovered over it. Not yet, something told her. Not now. Later that morning, she visited the old weaving woman at the edge of the forest, hoping for answers. Granny Nyung had lived through 5 cycles of candle keepers and was said to remember more than she let on. The old woman welcomed her with a nod, then set to boiling tea with dried herbs that smelled faintly of rust and jasmine. They sat beneath a thatched roof, surrounded by spools of red thread and old wax molds shaped like birds, eyes, and open mouths. "You saw the wax child, didn't you?" Granny Nyung said softly, without preamble. Lien looked up, startled. "You know about it?" "Everyone who touches the blood candle dreams of him. He is not a spirit. He is a memory." Her eyes narrowed. "But whose depends on the sin." Lien's voice cracked. "It touched me." The old woman stirred her tea. "Then it marked you." Granny Nyung spoke slowly, deliberately, as if every word weighed something. "The wax child is the first sin of your family. Your grandmother, your true grandmother, not the one who raised you, offered her child to the altar to seal a pact with the ancestors. It was a time of famine, of sickness. She believed a life given would save many." "She burned her own child?" Lien whispered, horrified. "No, worse." Granny Nyung looked away. "She preserved him, dipped him in wax, lit the wick in his chest once every full moon. The village flourished, no illness, no deaths during the festival seasons. But each year, the candle wept more, until he began to move in dreams." Lien felt her stomach twist. Why didn't anyone stop her? "We needed her. We needed the flame. You see, child, people will forgive anything if it brings them safety." Lien stared into her tea. The surface shimmered with a reflection that was not her own. Granny Nyung leaned closer. "That is why your mother broke the chain. She refused to light the candle, refused to make an offering. She wanted the flame to die. But it didn't." "No," the voice darkened. "It found another keeper." Back in her mother's home, Lien sat on the floor for hours watching the candle. The wick never moved, but it didn't need to. She began to notice little things. The candle was always warm. The red wax never collected dust, and each night her dreams grew more vivid. The wax child returned again and again, sometimes whispering names she didn't know, sometimes showing her flashes of a house that no longer stood, sometimes just staring, silently weeping from a face that could not hold shape. One night, he brought her a gift. A hand, small, child-sized, made of wax, but warm like flesh. It pulsed faintly in her hand before melting between her fingers. She woke with wax on her sheets. Not metaphor. Actual wax. Red blood. Lien began to mark the nights. On the 3rd night, her mirror cracked down the center without reason. On the 4th, her shadow stretched farther than it should, twisting up the wall and curling into symbols she couldn't read. By the 5th night, she stopped lighting lanterns altogether. It didn't matter. The candle glowed faintly, even unlit. It hummed. And on the 6th night, the wax child spoke in full. "I remember everything," he whispered. "I remember the blade. I remember the bowl. I remember the heat when it should have been cold." Leanne asked, voice shaking, "Are you him?" The child tilted his head. "I am all of them." "What do you want?" "To be remembered correctly." She didn't understand. He stepped closer. "They say I was a sacrifice, but I was a seal. They say I was an offering, but I was a warning." "A warning for what?" He touched her forehead, and a vision burst behind her eyes. Fire, screaming, a ritual circle drawn in red, candles spinning in the air, a mother on her knees, a baby pulled from her arms, and laughter, low, guttural, triumphant, from voices not of this world. Leanne staggered backward. The child vanished, but the scent remained. Wax and sin. The next morning, Leanne went to the temple at the high top, the one closed since her mother's death. No one followed her, no one dared. The doors creaked open under her hand. Inside, the walls were lined with melted candles, each snuffed violently. The air was suffocating. At the center of the temple was a bowl, stone, cracked. Dried blood clung to the inside like old ink, and carved into the base were 13 names. 12 of them were crossed out. The 13th read, Leanne. She stumbled back, breath catching in her throat. Then, beneath her name, freshly carved in wax, the wick awakens. That night, she did not sleep. She sat before the candle. The dreams would come. They always did. And somewhere in them, the wax child would return again, dripping, whispering, waiting. The blood inside her pulsed with memory. Her skin itched with unspoken names. Her reflection no longer matched her breath. The candle had not been lit, but still, it burned.
In the daylight, the village looked almost kind. Sunlight streamed through the mist in soft golden shafts. Chickens wandered lazily between stones. A woman swept her porch while humming an old lullaby with no words. Children laughed somewhere in the rice paddies, their voices rising like smoke. And yet, none of them remembered. Not the candle, not the wax, not the night. When Leanne asked the shopkeeper about the candle store, he blinked slowly, confused. "There's no such place," he said, scratching the side of his neck. "We've never had one. Only the temple sells candles during the ghost festival." "What about the old one by the banyan tree?" His brows drew together, puzzled. "That's where the clay pot maker used to live. No shop there, not in my time." "But I was just there," Leanne insisted, 2 nights ago." He smiled, but his eyes looked past her. "Sometimes dreams feel real." And with that, he turned away, whistling to himself, as if her words had already evaporated. Leanne walked the village from end to end. Each place she remembered as a child, the stone altar where her mother used to whisper prayers, the bridge where her cousin drowned, the corner where the girl with burned hands used to sell incense, had changed. Not decayed, not rebuilt, just shifted, as though something had rewritten parts of the village while everyone slept, erasing not just walls and windows,
but memory itself. At the riverbank, she found a tree she recognized, twisted, leafless, its bark scarred with symbols. It had once been called the sorrow tree, where women who'd lost children left offerings of milk and blood. Now, no one came here. The ground beneath it was still, the air cold. As she touched its bark, a thin trickle of wax oozed from one of the carvings, clear and sweet-scented, like sap, but heavier. She stepped back. No one else saw it. No one else looked. Leanne was alone in her remembering. When she returned to the old candle shop, it was gone. Where the blackened doorway once stood was now an empty clearing, overgrown with soft moss and wild ginger. No door, no sign, no smell of wax. She stood there for a long time, staring at the air. Then, just as she turned to leave, she saw something glinting beneath a patch of moss. She crouched, brushed it away. A piece of wax, still warm, still pulsing. Back at her mother's house, the candle on the altar had grown. It was taller than before, the wick longer. The wax base now dripped into a circle etched on the altar's surface, a circle that hadn't been there yesterday. And in the center of that circle was something new. A coin, blackened, ancient, marked with 13 notches. She reached for it, but the air between her hand and the coin snapped like a thread pulled too tight. A ringing echoed in her ear. The candle flickered, though no flame danced. She pulled her hand back, trembling. "You are not ready," whispered a voice from behind her. She turned. The boy was back. His waxen eyes flickered as if holding two flames inside. "You're part of it now," he said softly. "That's why they don't remember." "They've forgotten? On purpose?" He shook his head. "No, the candle chooses what stays and what fades. The village burned once, long ago. They asked the flame to forget. It agreed." I stared at him. "And now?" "The flame is remembering, and so are you." That night, Leanne wandered into her own dream, but this time she wasn't alone. She walked through the village, unchanged in the dreamscape, the same cracked altar, the same red strings on the trees, but every person she saw turned to face her, eyes wide, mouths stitched shut with melted wax. One by one, they reached out hands dripping with fire, and above them all was floating in the night sky like a second moon, the candle, red, burning, dripping wax across the rooftops like rain. When she looked down, her feet were no longer touching the ground. She hovered, pulled upward by invisible threads of memory, and just as she woke, she heard her mother's voice, a whisper in the wind. "Don't let it forget you, child, or you'll be erased too." She gasped awake. The mirror in her room was covered in wax, not spilled, but painted. Words had been drawn with it in long looping strokes. "You are the last wick." Leanne ran to the window. The sun was rising. The village was already moving again, as if nothing had happened, as if no dreams had ever burned their way into bone. And when she stepped outside and asked the neighbor's daughter if she had seen anything strange in the night, the girl just blinked and said, "There was no night, only morning." Leanne walked the whole village that day, to the temple, to the tree, to the well. Everywhere the same answers. There was no candle shop,
There was no boy, there was no wax. The village had forgotten, and she feared the day was coming when she might forget too. Unless she lit the candle, unless she let it remember for her.
She lit the candle on the seventh night. Not out of ritual, not out of reverence, but out of fear. The dreams were no longer confined to sleep. They leaked into daylight, staining her reflection, curling the corners of her shadow. In the kitchen, spoons clattered by themselves. In the hallway, pictures turned to face the wall. And once, as she passed the mirror, she saw her own face blink half a second too late. The village had forgotten her mother, forgotten the rituals, forgotten the wax child. But the candle hadn't. It remembered everything. And now it waited. That evening, Lien stood before the altar. The house was silent. She held the match in her trembling fingers, its red tip trembling like a vein about to burst. The candle's wick was dry, long, curled upward like a claw. She struck the match. Flame bloomed. For a heartbeat, it was just fire, orange and small, dancing on the matchstick like any other. But when she lowered it to the candle, everything changed. The moment the flame touched the wick, a sound echoed through the house, low and hollow, like breath caught in a throat. The windows pulsed inward, the floor creaked beneath her feet, and the scent filled the air. Thick, metallic, like old coins boiled in honey, sweetness with something rotting beneath. The candle burned red. Not the flame, no, the flame was white, piercing and silent, but the wax beneath it bled. It dripped slowly, like syrup, down the altar's side, and wherever it touched, the wood hissed, not from heat, but from memory. Images bloomed in the flickering corners of the room, not shadows, scenes. Her mother kneeling before the altar, hands red to the wrist. A child screaming in silence. A crowd chanting around a well, their mouth open but teeth sealed shut. A fire burning in a circle. The wax child watching from behind a curtain of smoke. Lien stepped back. The room pulsed with a heartbeat that was not hers. Then the candle whispered. Yes, whispered. A voice rose from the flame, soft and layered, like 13 voices braided into one. The offering was delayed. The balance must be paid. Lien fell to her knees, gasping. The flame grew taller, reaching toward the ceiling, though no heat came from it. Then the mirror across the room shattered, and from within the shards, smoke poured out, thick, heavy, breathing. The smoke twisted until it formed the outline of a woman, barefoot, wearing a red veil soaked in wax. Her hands dripped blood, and though her face was hidden, Lien knew who it was. "Mother!" she whispered. The figure tilted its head as if hearing a voice from far away. Then it raised one trembling hand and pointed, not at Lien, but at the candle. The wick pulsed, and then the figure collapsed into ash. Lien screamed. The flame dimmed, the wax slowed, the voice fell silent, and the room returned to stillness. Only the candle remained, burning softly. Its wax now formed a perfect circle on the altar, and inside it, written in tiny red script, was a single word: remember. The next day, the villagers looked at her differently. They did not smile, they did not nod, but they looked. One woman whispered as Liane passed, "She lit it." An elder on the roadside crossed himself and turned away. Children stopped laughing when she approached. It was as if the entire village had heard something in the night and chosen not to speak of it, as if a door had creaked open between the world of the living and something far older, and they feared who had opened it. Liane returned home and found the candle unchanged, still burning, still weeping wax. She could not bring herself to blow it out. She tried. She leaned close, lips parted, breath ready. But as she exhaled, the flame danced away from her breath like a living thing. It curled, it spun, and it whispered again, "You can't extinguish what remembers you." That night she dreamed again, but this time she was inside the candle. The wax surrounded her like a cocoon. It was warm, but not comforting, heavy, stifling. Every breath filled her lungs with scent, rosemary, soot, blood, and regret. She moved through corridors made of wax. They pulsed like organs, dripping memory with every step. Each room she passed showed a moment in her bloodline. A girl handing over a lock of hair in a bowl of oil. A boy with his mouth sewn shut, standing in a circle of fire. A woman cutting her palm over a flame. A baby dipped headfirst into molten wax, emerging silent and still. And then her, standing at the altar, holding the candle, becoming the 13th. The wax beneath her feet cracked. The dream broke. She awoke gasping, her skin glistening. Not sweat, wax. The village held its silence. No one asked questions, no one offered food. But every day, someone left something at her door. A charm carved from bone, a bundle of thread, a matchbox, empty, as if preparing her for something, or apologizing in advance. On the 7th day, the candle spoke again, this time not in whispers, in names. Liane stood still as the flame burned brighter and recited, slowly, one by one, the names of every ancestor in her bloodline. Some she had heard in stories, others she'd never known. Each name was followed by a faint ringing, like a bell struck far away. And when the final name echoed, her own, the flame bowed slightly, as if in reverence. Then the wax hardened into a new shape, a hand, outstretched, waiting. Liane placed her fingers in it. It closed, and she knew this was only the beginning. He was waiting for her by the old well. The mist hadn't lifted that morning, thick and unmoving as if the air had curdled in place. Birds did not sing, leaves did not rustle. The world had paused, and there he stood, the boy with wax eyes. His skin was colorless, pale as dried wax. His clothes were too small for him, frayed shirt, buttonless, stained with soot, bare feet pressed into the mud, but left no imprint. And his eyes, they were the worst part. Two hollow sockets filled not with darkness, but with candle wax, solid, smooth, as if someone had poured melted wax into his face and let it harden where sight should be. When Lian approached, he did not move. He simply raised his head slowly and smiled. "You lit it," he said. His voice was soft, soft like the sound of silk tearing, like breath before a scream. "Yes," she whispered, "I did." The boy cocked his head. "Then now we speak." She followed him without asking where he was going. Through the village paths, through a trail no one used anymore, where weeds grew too straight and the ground was too warm. Trees leaned inward here. They listened, and Lian could feel them breathing. They passed no one, only silence. Finally, they reached a clearing in the woods. In its center stood an altar made entirely of wax, tall, towering, dripping slowly, though there was no flame upon it. At its base sat a small bowl filled with water that shimmered red, like blood and light tangled together. The boy pointed to it. "This is where names are fed." She stepped forward. The wax altar oozed gently, its sides forming slow, weeping faces, melted mouths crying upward. She leaned over the bowl. The reflection wasn't hers. It was her mother's. Alive, breathing, but weeping. Her hands were tied, her lips stitched. She shook her head slowly, as if warning from somewhere far beyond time. Lian stumbled back. The boy caught her hand. "She is not trapped. She is remembered. That's the difference." "What do you want from me?" she asked. "I want nothing. The candle does." He led her to the side of the altar. There, embedded in the wax, were 13 handprints, 12 old, cracked and fading, one smooth and new, her size. The boy gestured. "Place it." She stared at her own hand, then slowly pressed her palm into the empty imprint. The wax was warm, almost tender, like flesh holding breath. The altar pulsed beneath her skin. Then, a voice, a memory. "I gave you your name so you would carry mine." Her grandmother's voice, one she hadn't heard since childhood. Another voice followed, male, stern. "The 13th wick must burn until the next remembers. Until then, hold the flame." And then silence. The wax released her. Her palm now bore the shape of the altar, 13 circles like a ring burned into her skin. She turned to the boy. His wax eyes milted slightly, tears dripping from sockets that could not see. "You are the last keeper, but not the last to pay." She asked him then what he was. He said nothing at first. But when the wind passed, whispering through the trees, he answered, "I was once a candle." His mouth didn't move. The words simply arrived. "I was dipped in wax while I still breathed.
I was born into offering. My blood sealed the pact. My scream was the wick. Now I walk until the pact ends." "Are you alive?" she asked. "Are you?" The question pierced her. "Why me?" "Because your bloodline lit the first flame. Because your mother refused the offering. Because the village forgets, and you didn't." She dropped her gaze. "I didn't ask for this." "No," he said, "but blood remembers even what the mind wants to forget." When she returned to the village, the candle was taller. It no longer sat on the altar. It stood, not placed, but risen. Its base had grown into legs twisted like branches. The wax shimmered along the floor, spreading into veins, roots, reaching beneath the house. And its flame burned red now. Not orange, not white. Red, as if lit by breath instead of fire. When she tried to leave the room, the flame leaned toward her. "Stay," it seemed to say. So she sat before it again. And this time, it showed her a face in the wax. The wax child. But older now, more defined. A boy of 10, then 12, then 15. Each drip reformed him, and each form looked more like her. Until she realized he wasn't her ancestor, he was her brother. She went to Granny Young that night, her voice tight with desperation. "Did I have a brother?" The old woman froze. The tea in her hand trembled. "No, no, child. You're lying. You mustn't ask." "Why?" "Because the candle watches, and it punishes remembering." Leanne grabbed her hand. "Tell me the truth." Granny Young looked into her eyes, and for a moment something broke. "There was another, before you. Your mother bore him during the Red Moon Festival, but he came too early, too cold, too quiet." "He died?" "He was taken." Granny Young wept then. "They made her give him, said the blood would protect us all, that the candle needed a boy. She never forgave them, never forgave herself. That's why she ran, why she stopped lighting the wick." Leanne stood in silence. The candle hadn't chosen her randomly. It had chosen family. And now it wanted more than memory. It wanted truth. That night, she placed her palm on the candle's side. "Show me," she whispered. The wax rippled, and the flame pulsed. She saw the boy again, her brother, bound in cloth, lowered into wax, eyes wide, silent, no cry, the wick placed into his chest, lit, held, people around him, chanting, a village saved, a child erased. Leanne pulled her hand away, tears streaming from her eyes, and the candle whispered one word, "Forgive." But forgiveness felt too soft, and the wax too warm, and her blood too loud in her ears. It began with a cough. Barely a sound, barely a breath, a hiccup in the rhythm of morning. Lean heard it through the window as she sat by the altar, staring at the flame. A soft, wet cough from the neighboring house, her cousin's, where a baby had been born just 2 weeks ago. The candle flickered. The cough came again, and this time it ended in a whimper. Lean rose, heart beating fast. The wax on the altar had curled inward overnight, forming a spiral.
Inside the spiral, the red had darkened, no longer bright, but brownish, sticky, like old blood drying in a wound. She stepped outside. Mist lay thick on the path, and through it came the scream. The baby was barely breathing. His tiny chest rose and fell in shallow flutters. His mouth opened, but no sound came. His lips were pale, his face soaked with sweat, and from his nose dripped wax, red, viscous, slow. The villagers stood in a circle, frozen in disbelief. The healer tried herbs, prayers, fire. Nothing worked. The wax would not stop. When Lean entered the room, the baby's mother collapsed at her feet. "You did this," she sobbed. "You brought it back. You lit the candle." Lean's voice cracked. "I didn't offer him. I didn't offer anyone." A silence fell, heavy, accusing. "But someone did," the midwife whispered, and all eyes turned toward the altar in Lean's home. The elders met in the night. By lantern light and closed doors, they spoke in hushed tones and trembling breath. "She lit it without consent," said one. "The pact was broken. The balance is shifting," said another. "The candle is feeding again," muttered a third, "but the blood must be willing." Lean stood before them, accused by silence more than words. "I didn't leave anyone. I didn't choose the child." "But the candle did," Elder Ba said, and there was no reply to that, because they all knew. The candle chose who remembered. The candle chose who burned. And now, the candle had chosen again. Back at the altar, Lean found a new symbol in the wax. A cradle, surrounded by flame. And beneath it, a fingerprint, tiny, perfect, pressed into the wax as if made from the baby's own hand. She gasped and stepped back. The candle's flame flared. Balance is not mercy. It is only memory made true. That night, Lean sat with the candle and wept. "I didn't mean for this," she said. The flame tilted, listening. "I only wanted to remember, to stop the forgetting, not this." The wax trembled. And then the wax child appeared, half-formed, flickering, like smoke held in waxen shape. "You lit it without offering," he said. His voice was not cruel, not angry, just tired. "Now the candle takes what it must." "Then take me," she cried. "Not him, not the child. Take me." The wax child tilted his head. "You are already burning," but the wick was still hungry. "Let me feed it," she whispered. "It must be willing." "I am." But the child only smiled. "Then you must show it." The next morning, Lean walked to the shrine tree and cut her palm. She let the blood drip onto a bowl of wax, then knelt before the altar. She lit 13 sticks of incense. She whispered her name. And then she whispered his, the baby's. "I offer my years," she said. "Take from me what was taken from him." The candle flickered, then flared. The wax on the altar surged upward, crawling toward her, wrapping around her wrist like a serpent. It burned, but she didn't pull away. She gritted her teeth and stayed still as the wax encased her hand, hardened and carved a new symbol into her skin. A cradle. But this one was empty. Far across the village, the baby cried. A full cry, loud, alive. And the wax stopped dripping. The villagers whispered again, but this time they didn't accuse. They watched her differently now, with fear and something like reverence. Lean returned to her home, her hand still wrapped in wax. The candle burned steadily, but the spiral on the altar had opened, and in its center, beneath the wax, was a bone. Small, childlike, carved with a name she did not know. She held it in her hand, trembling. The candle whispered, "An offering without consent stains both flame and flesh. You burned for him, but the stain remains." And in the silence that followed, her shadow stretched across the wall, but her body had not moved. That night, she dreamed of a room filled with children. They were made of wax, eyes closed, hands folded, sleeping upright. Each bore a wick on their chest. Each had a name carved into their shoulders. Some were hers, some were not. Some had been taken, some had never been offered. And in the center of the room, a mother screamed, not from pain, but from guilt. Lean reached for her, but the wax children turned their heads all at once. Their eyes opened, and inside each socket burned a tiny red flame. She woke with wax in her mouth, soft, bitter. When she spit it out, it held a shape, a child's tooth. Still warm.
It came on the 13th night, the night the candle had waited for, the night the ancestors whispered through wax, the night when every wick, old and new, must burn. Liane woke at dusk with the distinct sensation that she was not alone. Her body was cold, yet her skin glistened with sweat. A strange weight pressed against her chest. Not pain, not fear, but memory, heavy, breathing. Outside, the wind had stopped. The mist did not drift. The leaves did not stir. And in the distance, 13 bells rang, low, slow, uneven, as if rung by hands that no longer remembered how. She rose and lit a lantern, but the flame would not catch. She tried again, match after match. Nothing. Only the candle on the altar still burned. And beside it, 12 others had appeared. They stood in a perfect arc, curving like a smile of shadows around the main candle. Each one different, some short, some tall, some smooth, others warped like they had been burned and remelted 100 times. Each had a red wick. Each was unlit. Each exhaled a slow breath of cold air. Liane stared, heart pounding. She had not placed them. She had not carved them. But she knew them. These were ancestral candles, kept for generations, passed from blood to blood, buried, hidden, swallowed by forgetting, and now returned, because the pact had been reopened.
In her dreams, her grandmother once whispered of this night. When the 13th wick burns, the rest must follow, or the ancestors will not find their way. What happens if they don't? Leanne asked as a child. Her grandmother had not answered, only touched her lips with a trembling finger and said, "Then the door stays open." She stepped toward the candles. Each one smelled different, one of cinnamon and old tears, one of earth and iron, one of rot masked in rice wine. Together, they wove a tapestry of forgotten grief. Leanne took a breath, struck a match. The first candle lit without resistance, its flame small and blue. Then the second, and the third. By the time she reached the 7th, she was shaking. By the 10th, she was crying. When the 12th candle flared, all 12 flames leaned inward, toward the 13th. But the last candle was missing, the one meant for her. She searched the house, frantic. Every drawer, every shelf, nothing. She returned to the altar and found the wax child waiting there. He stood among the flames, untouched, unmelted. His body shone like lacquered bone. His eyes were hollow, filled with flame. "You can't light what you haven't offered," he said. "I've offered," she whispered. "Not enough." "I gave my years." "You hid your truth." I shook her head. "I've remembered everything." "Not everything," the wax child said. He stepped aside, and there, beneath the altar, partially buried in melted wax, lay a wick. It wasn't red. It was black, cold to the touch. She picked it up. It pulsed faintly, as if trying to forget it ever lived. And on it, scratched so faintly it could barely be seen, was a name. Leanne. She understood then. She was not just the keeper. She was the final offering. Not her blood, not her hand, not her name. Her whole self. The price of relighting the forgotten was remembrance itself. One must burn to make room for memory. And so, she placed the wick into the 13th candle. Its wax welcomed her fingers like warm breath. It wrapped itself around her skin, held her, soft, tender. Then she struck the match, and for a moment, nothing. Then, the 13th flame bloomed. It did not flicker. It opened. A flower of fire, red as sorrow. And the other 12 bowed toward it. One by one their flames flared, then steadied, and all 13 burned together. The air changed. The house moaned. From the floorboards, from the ceiling beams, from the cracks in the wall they came. Figures of wax and smoke, some with faces, some without. Some walked, some slithered, some floated just inches above the ground. Leanne did not move. She knew what they were. The unremembered, those trapped in half-memory, those whose names were buried, those whose offerings were stolen, those who never found the light. They circled her, watching, and one by one they passed through her chest. Each time she gasped, each time she lost a memory, her first kiss, her father's voice, the taste of plum wine, the sound of rain on tin. They took it all, and still she stood. The 13th wick burned brighter now, so bright it bled, and in its center, The wax child knelt, his eyes full now, not of wax, but tears. "You remembered," he said. "I gave myself," she whispered. "You became the wick." Then he reached forward and kissed her forehead. The wind returned, the air moved. Outside, the bells stopped ringing, and the 13 flames went out, one by one, softly, gently, like breath exhaled at last. The wax hardened, the names faded, and Lien fell to her knees, her eyes open, but her mind quiet. She had not died, but she had been given. In the morning, the village awoke to find the altar empty. No candles, no wax, only the scent, soft and lingering, of old sorrow burned clean. The 13th night passed, but Lien did not sleep. She lay still in her mother's house, eyes open, watching the ceiling breathe. It rose and fell with memory, not wind. The walls had absorbed too many voices. The floorboards groaned with the weight of names never buried properly. Something had changed. The candles were gone, all 13, and yet she could still feel their heat beneath her skin. Her veins pulsed like wicks, slow burning. Her breath moved like flame, and when she touched her chest, her heartbeat had a rhythm, not of life, but of ritual. 13 beats, and then stillness. 13 more, and stillness again, as if her blood had begun to pray. She spent the next morning combing through her mother's chest of offerings, searching not for relics, but truth. Beneath old prayer books, beneath the ash of forgotten charms, she found a scroll bound in human hair, brittle, frayed, tied with wax thread. She unrolled it slowly. Inside, diagrams, incantations, lists. It was a ledger, not of money, but of flesh. One column for names, one column for parts, hair, teeth, nails, skin. One column for date of offering, and one final column, labeled in faded red ink, burn duration. She felt bile rise in her throat. The candle makers had recorded it all. They had turned blood into a system. Every family had paid, some more than once. Some paid with a lock of hair at birth, some with a fingernail at marriage, some with teeth from the dying, and some, when desperate, gave entire lives. It wasn't just sacrifice, it was an economy. They had made an industry of remembrance, not to honor, but to control. If you gave, your dead were remembered. If you didn't, your name was erased from the flame. At the bottom of the scroll, written in a sharper hand, 13 flames for 13 families. All deaths must be lit. Any wick unlit becomes a stain. Lien ran her hand over the list. The final name, Lien. No offering recorded, no duration listed. Only 2 words beside her name. Inherited sin. She carried the scroll to Elder Ba. He sat by the temple steps, eyes milky, lips pressed tight. When she laid the parchment before him, he did not speak for a long time. Finally, he said, "You weren't supposed to see that. You all knew. We remembered by forgetting." She crouched before him. "My brother." Elder Ba's face tightened. "We were desperate. The rains hadn't come in years. The fields were dry, the children dying. Your mother, she bore him under famine. He was born under blood moon that marked him. You took him. No, we asked. She agreed. She never agreed. She only obeyed. Elder Ba's hands trembled. That's not the same as consent. And in the silence that followed, the wind turned cold. Back at the altar, Lien found something else waiting. The wax had returned, not dripping, not burning, sitting, shaped like a book. She touched it and it opened. Pages turned, though there were no words, only imprints, like pressed leaves, fingers, tears, wicks. Each page was someone's forgotten grief, each turned with a whisper. And on the final page, her mother's face, mouth open, eyes hollow, burned into wax as if the candle had recorded not just offerings, but remorse. She closed the book, and the flame inside her pulsed once more. That night the wax child returned, but he was older, almost a teenager now, taller, his features more human but still melted in places. The left side of his face sloped downward like soft wax. His eyes held hers. "You found the book," he said. "I had to know." He sat cross-legged before her. The candle makers believed they were saving the village, but they forgot one thing. What? That no fire burns without ash. He told her then of the first candle, forged from a child buried too soon, wrapped in mother's cloth, dipped in blood wax, and lit with a prayer no one should have spoken. The flame that followed didn't remember peace. It remembered hunger. And each offering after that didn't ease it, only fed it. The fire learned, and the fire chose. Sometimes it spared, sometimes it punished, but always it remembered. Until one day, a woman refused, and the fire dimmed, but never died. Lien looked into the boy's melted face. "My brother?" He nodded. "You remember me? I never forgot." A pause. Then he whispered, "But you did." She turned away. Tears stung her eyes. "I was a child." "And so was I," he said softly. She looked at him again. "What do you want from me?" "Not want, but need." "To do what?" "To forgive the fire, or extinguish it." Lien stared at the candle. Its flame was back now, small, but watching. She said nothing, because she didn't know how to forgive something that remembered every sin, especially hers. The well had been dry for years, or so the villagers said. But that morning, as Lien walked toward it, feet bare, skin cold, the scroll of ancestral sins pressed tight against her chest, she heard something, a breath, not wind, not water, something deeper, the sound of fire, weeping. She paused at the edge of the path. The mist clung to the grass like wet silk. The shrine tree nearby was still tied with red thread, its roots swollen with age. And at the center of the clearing, the old stone well stood silent, moss-covered, cracked, forgotten, but not empty. Lien approached slowly. The air around the well shimmered, not with heat, but memory,
It rose like steam, curling against her skin, whispering names she could not hear clearly. She placed one hand on the well's stone rim. It was warm, too warm. And then a whisper. "Do not look unless you're ready to be seen." She looked anyway, and there, far below, where there should have been darkness, was flame. A single flickering point of red, deep in the earth. It did not rise. It did not dance. It waited. And as she stared into it, something within the well stared back. She pulled the scroll from her pocket and dropped it in, the hair-bound record of every sin. It burned before it reached the fire. Ash drifted upward. And then the well moaned. A long, low sound, like wood breaking beneath water, like a prayer trying to become a scream. The wind returned. The sky dimmed. And from the mouth of the well came a slow exhale of heat. It smelled of charred bone and wax. Lien knelt beside the stones. "I gave the candle my years. I gave it my name. But I never gave it peace." A gust of heat rose suddenly, knocking her backward. She fell into the grass. When she sat up, the wax child stood over her. His eyes were no longer hollow. They were flames. "You came to the root." "The well was the first," she replied. He nodded. "They dipped the first candle here. When the water ran red, they said it was a sign. But it wasn't blood that stained it." He stepped aside, and behind him, the stones of the well shifted, not crumbling, opening, as if the well had always been a mouth, and now it whispered, "Return what was never offered." Lien rose and stepped closer. Inside the well now, the flame had grown. It licked the stones in slow spirals, and from its center rose a platform of melted wax. On it sat a scroll, different from the one she'd burned. She reached for it. Her hand passed through flame, but it did not burn. When she unrolled it, her heart stopped. It was a birth record, a name, a date, a mark. Lien. But it wasn't hers. It was a stillborn, a twin, her brother, and written in red beside it, unlit. She turned to the wax child. "You were never offered." He nodded. "They said I died, but they lied. They hid me. They whispered prayers over my silence, but the candle knew. The candle always knows." Lien clutched the scroll to her chest. "All this time you've been waiting for me to say it." "Yes." Tears welled in her eyes. "I remember you now." The flame surged. "I missed you." The wax child blinked, wax melting down his cheeks like tears. "You always had my voice, even when you didn't speak my name." The wind died. The well began to glow from within, and the fire rose, not hot, not burning, but warm, gentle. Lien reached into the flame again and pulled out a single candle, small, untouched, its wick blackened, but never lit. She held it in shaking hands. "This was meant to burn first," she said. The wax child nodded. "And now it will burn last." That night, Lien returned to the altar. She placed the small candle in the center. The others did not return. This one was enough. She struck the match, and this time she did not tremble. The wick caught, and the flame, bright and clean, rose straight, unwavering. It smelled of rice fields, of rain on wood, of home. And then the wax child appeared behind the flame. But he was no longer made of wax. He was a boy, whole, alive in memory, lit from within. He smiled at her, and she smiled back. The flame burned for 13 minutes. No voices, no smoke, no visions. Only warmth, only peace. And when it died, the candle dissolved into nothing. No wax remained, only a small mark on the altar, a circle, drawn in ash, and inside it, her name, his name, together. The well stopped weeping, the house stopped groaning, and for the first time in generations, the candle slept. Not forgotten, just at rest. Wax was never meant to flow upward. But that's what Lien saw the next morning. She entered the prayer room in silence, as she had for nights now, only to find the remnants of the extinguished 13th candle no longer melting down the altar. Instead, the wax had risen, coiled upward like a vine in bloom, a spiral, thin and trembling, growing from the ashes. And at its tip, a new wick formed, not placed by hand, but shaped from heat and breath and something older than memory. The wax remembered what it was, and now it was crawling back to the flame. Outside, the village had begun to shift. Small things at first. The dogs refused to bark. Their eyes followed unseen shapes. They howled at midday, not night. The rice in the bowls spoiled faster than it should. Mirrors fogged without steam. And no matter how early you woke, the sky was always dimmer than it should be. The people didn't speak of it, but they felt it. Something had changed. The ancestors were not resting. At the shrine tree, Lien saw her name again. This time, not written, but carved into bark, into bone. Wax filled the grooves, and around it 13 red threads danced, even without wind. She stared for a long time, and then she noticed something else. The roots of the tree had cracked open. Something was pushing from beneath. A hand? No, a wick. Old, frayed, still smoldering. That night, the wax child visited her once more. But now he looked aged, not in years, but in weight, as if each day since the 13th burn, the burden of memory had thickened his form. His wax was darker now, his limbs heavier. His eyes, still burning, flickered. "You lit what was unlit," he said. "I thought that would be enough." "So did I." A pause. But memory is not the same as peace. Lien sat beside him. Then what is it? Memory is the shadow. Peace is what casts it. She didn't fully understand, but the candle did. It burned behind them, though no one had lit it. Wax now ran along the ceiling. It dripped upward, toward the roof, toward the sky. Lien touched the wax trail. It was warm, and it pulsed. When she closed her eyes, she heard things. Chants, prayers, screams, names, wicks being cut, mothers weeping, a temple burning. And through it all, one constant voice, her own, calling to be remembered even before she was born. The wax child looked up. He said, "They're returning." "Who?" "The forgotten." Lien's throat tightened. The ones never named, the ones burned without record, the ones buried beneath trees and rivers and shame. She whispered, "I thought lighting the wicks would close the door." He nodded. It did, but the wax remembers the shape of it. That night, the village pulsed with breath. Houses creaked at the same hour. Candles flared without flame, and every reflection on glass, on water, on bowls of oil looked back not with your own face, but someone else's, someone who should have never been erased. Lien awoke to find wax beneath her bed, not spilled, arranged, a circle of symbols, not runes, names, each one carved in looping, sorrowful strokes, each name followed by a question mark, as if even the candle no longer knew who it had burned. She stepped outside and found the villagers waiting. No one spoke, but every home had placed a candle on their doorstep, unlit, red, waiting, and the wax on each one ran upward, toward the wick, like the past trying to be born again. Granny Nyung broke the silence. Her voice was thin, fragile. "You opened the memory." "I only lit what was given," Lien replied. The old woman shook her head. "No, you answered when no one else would." She stepped forward, placed a hand on Lien's shoulder. "Now you must guide them back." "Back where?" "To the fire." That evening, the entire village gathered. One by one, each person brought their candle to the temple steps. Lien lit them, not with matches, but with the flame that still burned beneath her skin. The wax ran backward, from the air to the wick, from time to now. And when all 13 candles burned, the wind finally returned, strong, cleansing. The trees bowed, the dogs grew quiet, and the temple walls shimmered as if weeping. Then they came. From the fields, from the trees, from the earth, figures. Some barely formed, some whole, some walking on feet, some dragging what was left of them. The forgotten, the nameless, the never offered. They came not to haunt, but to be held, to be seen, and Lien stood at the temple's gate and named them, one by one, name after name, real or imagined. She gave them names, and as each was named, they turned to wax, melted, fell into flame, and were gone. When the last one vanished, the wax stopped flowing, the flames went out on their own, and for the first time, the air was truly still. Lien knelt in the silence. The wax child knelt beside her. He smiled. "You remembered enough." And then he too melted, softly, without pain, only warmth, only peace. In the morning, the well was sealed, the wax gone, the altar clean, the village quiet, and Lien was just a girl again. Not a keeper, not a wick, not a flame, but memory. Living.
There was no more wax. The altar was dry. The flames were gone. And yet something remained. It was in the quiet, in the way the house no longer creaked but watched, in the way shadows stretched just slightly longer than the sun allowed, in the way the villagers avoided her eyes, even when their mouths murmured gratitude. Len had done what the candle required. She had lit what was lost, named what had been denied. But the pact was not yet closed. She could feel it, in her bones, in her breath. The flame still lingered within her, burning slow and steady like a memory waiting to bloom. The dreams returned, but this time they were not dreams. They were instructions, visions wrapped in ritual. She stood in the center of a circle of ash. She held a bowl of red wax that shimmered like blood, and 13 figures knelt around her, one for each generation of the forgotten. The wax child stood just beyond the ring, watching, waiting. And then the voice of the candle. One must remain to remember. She awoke at midnight, and the house was full. Not with people, with presence. Every chair, every corner, every crack in the floorboards whispered. Her ancestors had returned, not to stay, to watch, to witness, to wait for what they had once asked others to do and now could only ask of her. Len walked to the altar. The wax was gone, but the circle remained, and in its center, a mirror, small, round, framed in scorched wood. She lifted it, saw her reflection, but it wasn't her. It was her mother, then her grandmother, then a girl she didn't know, wide-eyed, bleeding from the mouth, holding a newborn, then another, and another, until the mirror showed the wax child again. He smiled and mouthed one word. Now. She went to the well. The stone was cool, the air still. There was no flame now, only silence, but she knelt beside it anyway, opened her palm, drew a line of blood, and let it drip. Not as sacrifice, but offering, willing. As her blood touched the stones, the wax child appeared, no longer flickering, fully formed. His eyes calm, no longer burning. I never wanted to stay, he said. I know. But I couldn't leave, not until one of you stayed in my place. She nodded. I'm not here to hold you back. I know. She stood, pressed her palm to his chest, where the wick once burned, now only warmth. And slowly he stepped back, into the mist, into the trees, into memory, and vanished. She returned to the altar for the last time. The villagers had gathered outside. They watched in silence. Some wept, some prayed, some simply listened to the wind. She lit a single candle, small, plain, untouched, and placed it on the altar. Then she knelt and whispered, I offer not my blood, not my name, not my life, but my remembering. The flame flared, and she felt herself hollow, not in pain, in purpose. The memories of all the forgotten, the silenced, the burned, poured into her, not as voices, as weight, soft, heavy, eternal. And when she stood again, she was the altar, she was the candle, she was the memory. The villagers left offerings for her that night, jars of salt,
small bowls of wax, folded paper names. No one knocked, no one asked. They knew. Len would never leave the village again. She would remain as keeper, as flame, as the final offering, not in death, but in devotion. Years later, the temple was rebuilt. Children lit candles at its steps. No one remembered why the ritual began, only that a woman once lived there, quiet and kind, who spoke to wax and called it by name. And above the altar where her house once stood, hung a mirror, framed in scorched wood. It showed your reflection, but only if you remembered her name.
Lien no longer needed to speak. The villagers stopped asking her name. She walked through the fields barefoot, leaving no prints. When she passed, candles flickered even without flame. Children stopped mid-play to stare, eyes wide with something older than curiosity, recognition. They did not remember why, only that when she looked at them, they felt known. When she knelt by the altar, the wax melted faster. When she touched the earth, seeds sprouted with no sun. When she wept, though rarely, the wind changed direction. Some began to say she was no longer of this world, but she never left it. Inside her home, the altar had changed. It no longer held candles. It held impressions. The grooves of those who had once knelt there pressed so deeply into the wood, it was as though memory itself had weight. She kept no mirror, no scrolls, no offerings, just the flame. It never wavered, never dimmed, never grew. It simply was. But it no longer burned wax. It burned something else. Names. One morning, Lien awoke to silence, but not the natural kind. The world had paused. Birds mid-flight hung in place. A river stilled in mid-flow. A single leaf trembled at the edge of falling, but would not drop. Time had held its breath. And in that breathless space, the flame pulsed. It had eaten a name. She could feel it. Gone. Not just forgotten. Erased. She looked to the altar. The name was hers, but not all of it. Only her mother's voice calling it. Only the way her brother once whispered it in dreams. Only the echo. And now, that echo was ash. She lit no candle that day. Instead, she sat before the flame and asked, "Why?" And the flame answered, not in words, but absence. The absence of memory, the absence of song. She reached for her own reflection, and her fingers touched only smoke. That night, a stranger came to the village. He wore a red scarf. His boots were caked in ash. He said he was looking for the woman who remembers. The villagers pointed him to Lien's house, but none walked him there. They never crossed the threshold. He stepped inside. She looked up, and for the first time in years, someone asked, "Who are you?" She opened her mouth, but no sound came. Only a breath, only a flicker, only wax running along the inside of her lips. He smiled. "I thought so," he said, then pulled a candle from his coat, unlit, black, its wick soaked in something too thick for oil, and he placed it on her altar. She stared at the candle. It stared back, and the moment it touched the wood, the other flame, the one that had always burned, shivered. Lien reached for it. The stranger stopped her. "Don't," he said. She paused. He removed his scarf. His neck bore 13 brands, wick marks, scars. "I was like you," he said. "I remembered too much, until the flame began to feed." "On what?" she whispered. "On me." The flame flared, and the walls of the house wept wax. It dripped upward again, toward the roof, toward the sky, toward the mouths of forgotten stars. And then the stranger asked, "How many names do you still carry?" Lien hesitated. "I don't know." "That's the danger," he said. "When the flame has devoured enough, it turns." "Into what?" He looked at her, and for the first time she saw his eyes were hollow, filled with soot. A god. The flame behind her whispered, not words, but promises. "Light them all, give them all back, let the world remember everything." Lien trembled, because she could. She held the names, she held the faces, she could return them. But the cost. "Will I still be me?" she asked. The flame pulsed. "What is you when you are the last to forget?" She picked up the black candle. The stranger stepped back. "If you light it, it never goes out. Even if you die, even if the world ends, the name it burns becomes eternal." She held it to her chest, felt it hum. It knew her. It had waited. And suddenly she saw a child born during famine, a mother kneeling beside a red veil, a village chanting to survive, her name written on the first wick. She wasn't the last. She had always been the first. Forgotten, lit, burned, and now reborn to burn again. She lit the black candle. The flame was not red, it was soundless light. No heat, no smoke, only clarity. And in its glow, the stranger vanished. Not fled, absorbed, like a name folded into a flame too bright for the world to hold. The wax on the walls melted backward. The altar crumbled into light. The mirror outside the temple cracked, not shattered, peeled. And behind its surface, every name Lien had ever carried spilled out into the wind. People awoke weeping without reason. Others whispered names they did not know they'd lost. And a baby in the next village laughed for the first time and said a name no one had taught her. Lien sat before the black candle. Alone. The flame devoured memory, but in doing so gave peace, because forgetting was not always loss. Sometimes it was mercy. Sometimes it was release. And as the flame burned on, Lien smiled. Her face faded from mirrors. Her name faded from mouths, but not from the wax. Never from the wax. The wax remembered what the world could not, and it burned only for her.
The house is empty now. The door still creaks open in the wind. The altar has crumbled into soot. The mirror is dusted with age, its frame charred and quiet. But the villagers still avoid the threshold, not from fear, not anymore, but reverence. No one speaks her name, not because they've forgotten, but because they were taught to remember without saying. And in the center of the house, where wax once flowed like breath, a small candle still stands, unlit, yet warm, always warm. They say the woman who lived here was never born, she was poured, formed from old memory, shaped by flame, given breath by sorrow. Others say she still walks, not as ghost, not as shadow, but as thought,
in every child who wakes from a dream of fire, in every elder who whispers prayers to someone they can't name, in every stranger who lights a candle and doesn't know why. One evening, a boy finds the house. He isn't from the village. He carries a backpack filled with books. He follows no map. He only came because he heard something. A whisper, a dream, a name he doesn't know how to pronounce, only feel. He steps inside. It's quiet, but not empty. Dust stirs like breath. The floor hums beneath his feet. And in the corner, he sees it. The candle, still standing, still waiting. He walks to it, pauses, then, with trembling fingers, strikes a match. The flame is small, colorless at first, then red, then gold, then something deeper. Not a color, a memory. The boy breathes in and something flickers inside him. A woman's voice, soft, distant, calling a name he forgot he'd once had. He sits, cross-legged, silent, and the candle burns without melting. Just light, just warmth, just presence. Outside, the wind picks up. It carries the scent of wax and something older. The villagers pause. They look toward the house. No fear, no prayer, just stillness. They know. It has begun again. The boy dreams that night. He walks through fields of ash. Hands reach from the soil, not to grab, but to be held. He kneels beside them, calls them by name, names he's never learned but always known. Each time he speaks one, a flame rises in the dark, not to burn, to guide. He is not afraid, because in the distance he sees her, not as ghost, not as woman, but as flame, carrying 13 wicks, smiling, and she nods. When he wakes, the candle is gone. Only the wax circle remains, still warm, still pulsing, and in the center of it, his own name, written in smoke. Outside the village, the well hums again. The shrine tree stretches. The red threads sway. The roots beneath shift, but do not open, because the door is closed, but never locked. The pact has not ended. It has changed. Not a ritual now, a remembering, carried from hand to hand, from breath to breath, from one who burned to one who watches. And when that boy grows old, they will say he was never meant to be born, only lit. Because somewhere in that empty house, in the quiet, in the dust, the warmth still lingers, the wax still listens, and the candle still burns.